It's a band called Fugazi from an album called Steady Diet of Nothing. Fugazi, a later incarnation of a band that was better known as Minor Threat, evolved into what is now Fugazi. Actually, they're defunct now, but a lot more mature, more cerebral expression of music, and very enjoyable indeed. This is Jason with Hexes and Soldiers, episode number 42, which is synonymous with my age. So I've managed to put out an episode a year since I've been on this planet, if you want to look at it like that. 42 episodes. And at one time, I think I had said, I know I had at least 50 in me. Well, we'll see how that goes. So that leaves what, 8? Certainly I have 8 more episodes in me and probably more than that. But a personal goal, again, of 50 episodes I'm still shooting for. Seems well within my grasp. Um, that said, how are you guys? I'm doing fine. Busy as ever. Perhaps more busy than ever. Which is why I thought I would add to my plate and do another uh, podcast. Hadn't done one in a month. And this might seem like a relatively quick turnaround, being as the trend recently has been anywhere from 3 to 6 months in between episodes. But bless your hearts, I received such positive reinforcement for episode 41. It just further fueled me and expedited things such that you now have episode 42 here before you. So I hope you enjoy it. We'll get to the crux of what this episode is about soon enough. The graphic image for this show should have already revealed that, as well as the description. Nevertheless, what's up? Let's see. Shout outs I'd like to give. I may have done this to an extent, more or less, before, but I'm going to do it again and be a little more specific in my shout out. I'm going to give a shout out to the wargaming community in general, but specifically those of you out there, and trust me, every day it seems like there's more and more of you who are just, I don't know how else to put it, but really ambassadors of the hobby. And it is a pleasure to make your guys' acquaintance. I'm meeting more and more of you. And trust me, I know there's still some bad apples out there, no names mentioned. That's with anything and everything. But seriously, it just still amazes me how nice and helpful some of you can be, and I have to say it is greatly appreciated, and it is definitely refreshing. Hats off to you guys. Um, Too many to name, too many to mention. Just off the top of my head, Steve Overton, I just made his acquaintance. Great guy, pleasure to talk to. Thank you, Steve, for everything that you have done and are doing and have suggested in your outlook on things and whatnot. It is all greatly appreciated. I'll give a shout out to David Heath and leave it at that. So many of you, uh, Anthony Salvaggio, that actually you, if you don't already know, I'm dedicating this episode to you because of the historical content. On and on and on. All of you, honestly, pat yourselves on the back. It's a pleasure to know you, and it, it it does the hobby a great service to have you as part of it, you guys. So enough of that junk. Um, with the shout outs, as far as what's new with me, broken record, put it on, let the needle skip, um, running H&S games, Ostfront, which I've said it before. I don't know how to say it differently other than to say it is really taking the wind out of my sails, man. A lot of stuff involved with this thing. Um, I'm going to get it done. I'm confident of that. I'm still on schedule. But this thing is just extremely heavy, and I should add that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I tell you what, in my opinion, the end result is going to be heavy, and that's that's the intention here. You know, this is no platoon leader. This is detailed, heavy stuff, and hopefully you guys uh, dig it. But regarding platoon leader, and bear with me, I will gloss over this as quickly as I can. I can't say much, if anything, but I will say that regarding this platoon leader series, it has been on hold due to the Ostfront endeavor. And again, strategically, as a business decision, I'm not sure if that is the greatest decision. Platoon leader was met with some open arms and seemingly enjoyed by a number of people. And with that, it might be argued that I should have continued in the same vein, but I don't like to do things that make sense or anything that is rational. So I took it upon myself to develop a completely new system, i.e., Ostfront, and thus place platoon leader on the back burner. Well, some recent developments. I'm keeping my feet grounded. I'm staying realistic with this, but I have to say the platoon leader series is now in the hands of an individual, a company that could really see this thing take off. And again, I can't name names, and there's a chance that it may not even happen, that the thing could fall through, which is another reason I'm not going to name anything. But I have to say, because I'm rather excited, uh, that if things did turn out the way I hope, this platoon leader game again could really take off, and the company that is currently reviewing it could really kick this thing into the sky, because this is a major company and they have a very, very, very faithful fan base. And been talking to the owner regarding platoon leader to see what he's looking for, and he's talking to me to see what I'm looking for. So we'll leave it at that, and I cross my fingers. I ask you guys to do the same. What does that mean for platoon leader? Well, again, that could mean very big things for platoon leader. So we'll leave it at that. Wish I could tell you more, but to be honest with you, at this point in the game, I don't even know myself what's going to happen. It's just at a certain phase where decisions have to be made on both ends, and the ball's pretty much in their court right now. But I'm sure they'll hit it back, and we'll go from there. So that's that. Big news for platoon leader. Wish I could say more, but I can't. So that leaves. We got some news, a little bit. I'll just gloss over it for you. Run through some things. GMT Games is having their what they're calling their fall sale. And nothing to do with descent or gravity. That is to say, fall as in the season. And they've got their, what is this, all customers 20% discount. And this sale, I should add, is going to last through Halloween, which is what, October 31st. So you got about a week, depending on when you hear this episode. But from publication date of this episode, you've got about a week to act. Now, the cool thing is, if you were a P500 supporter and got something via P500, you can then order something at 50% discount. And I think you can do this for every P500 order that you placed throughout the year. So my submarine game from Consim Press would qualify for that, I believe, time-wise. I also had the newest Commands and Colors Napoleonics expansion on pre-order, but I canceled that. So I think what I might do is cash in on the Consim Press game and get my Commands and Colors expansion. What am I talking? I'm talking about the Commands and Colors Generals, Marshals, and Tacticians. And for any of you that have played or haven't played, rather, Commands and Colors Napoleonics, it's a great game. It's nothing too overly complicated. You could play this thing drunk and or I don't know, passed out maybe. Don't know why you'd want to, but I guess you could. Fun game, great game. But as far as working, leaders in there and that any influence they may have in the game, it's minimal to non-existent. which I suppose that's what house rules are for. But they, the powers that be at GMT have gradually picked up on that, and that relates to their newest expansion, this Commands and Colors Generals, Marshals, Tacticians. And what this involves is some, I guess you call it tactics cards that really better reflect leadership within the game. And let me tell you, it's a great game, but that aspect is sorely missing. So now it's been addressed. So that's that for GMT, and then that leaves MMP's got some stuff. For those of you that know, you already know, but for those of you that don't, go to Console World if you want some good news feeds, because they're always putting up things there by way of new game releases, etc. So if you want a full comprehensive overview of just what's going on, you can't beat Console World. I highly recommend you swing by there if you haven't lately. But MMP, what have they done? And I'll ask MMP to pat themselves on the back as well. You know, they've caught flack in the past for dragging their feet when it comes to releases, but man, they are just pumping them out. And it's not just pumping stuff out to get stuff out the door. This is quality stuff, in my opinion, that is getting turned out. Not the least of which has been the latest Grand Tactical Series game, Greatest Day. Sword, Juno, and Gold. Do I have it? No. Do I want it? Yes. Can I afford it? No. That's why I don't have it, but it looks great. In fact, it looks beautiful. And I have every reason to believe the game plays fantastically, no doubt. Hope to get it at some point, but we'll see about that. Action Pack 29, most of you should already know about that for ASL. The ASL Pocket Rulebook's been released. Some guffaws regarding the moniker Pocket Rulebook. Doesn't necessarily fit in your pocket. Okay, everybody, let's not be quite so literal. And how do I put this? It's still a great thing when you compare it to the actual ASL binder. This thing can't be beat. It's got all your basic ASL rules in there. Now it doesn't have everything, but it's got the basic stuff that you will probably most frequently turn to if during a game, say you have a particular rules question. You just grab this thing and you're there. What else? ASL Action Pack 12 for Oktoberfest is out now, and the cover's just beautiful. Lots of scenarios in this thing, 10 of them. A new map. I think it's going to run you about 16 bucks. That's out, and what's coming? Well, ASL Journal 11 is coming out. Should be here sooner than later. Also have a new historical ASL module, Slaughter at Ponray. Apparently this is undergoing a facelift, courtesy of Charlie Keebler. And the map, they say, now covers a larger area, and some of the details have been clarified and corrected. Well, that's nice. The playtesters and designers are now working to update the campaign game and scenarios accordingly. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see that pop up on pre-order any day. That leaves, as far as stuff that's coming, a la ASL, you've got Yanks, will be up on pre-order soon enough, the reprint. Korean War ASL, now they say coming up fast, but I talked to Chaz, not directly, but he left me a message to a reply stating that this thing won't be up for pre-order probably till next year sometime. And then, of course, they say that Beyond Valor and ASL Starter Kits 2 and 3 reprints are also underway, along with a general ASL map board restock. Well, that's all just fine and dandy, isn't it? And they talk about a new game, and this is very intriguing because you don't see a lot of these. Talking about coming Front Towards Enemy, which is the upcoming platoon company level Vietnam game. And for those of you that don't know, Front Toward Enemy is, I believe, printed on the Claymore mines that were used in Vietnam. Plant them in the ground, front toward enemy. So when you bang on the clicker, what is it? I always remember from Platoon. Bang on that thing 3 times, man. Click the safety off, bang on it 3 times. Okay, I'll stop. Uh, yeah, hit the clicker, and hopefully you'll catch 3 or 4 NVA and move them out of the way, so to speak. And then they talk about GTS Crete, which is interesting as well. So there's your news. And again, anything further, I highly recommend you stop by Consim World and see what's up. And I came across, I do this every so often, and I fail to alert you guys to my findings. I should be better about that. But it was on YouTube the other day and came across this gentleman. He doesn't have a ton of stuff, but depending on how long he lasts, he will. This is heavy lifting by myself, and it doesn't take too much stretch of the imagination to garner just what he's referring to. This guy plays war games solo and films his planes. He's got, what's he got on here? Navajo Wars, Conflict of Heroes solo, and he's been going through this enemy action Ardennes game, which I don't have, but I'm highly aware of it. On the fence with it. Why? A number of reasons. Because do I need another Bulge game? Yes and no. Yes, because this is a solitaire designed Bulge game. Um, what else? And then you got Last Blitzkrieg coming from M&P, which reflects the new Dean Essig system, and there's that. So what do you do? I don't know. No shortage of Bulge games that can be perceived as good or bad. I'll perceive it as good. And I've already said you just have to create a better sifter for these things so you can catch the junk and toss it out and let the good stuff sift through. So that's that. Check out Heavy Lifting by Myself. The guy puts a lot of work into his stuff, and it'd be interesting to see just how far along he comes. So there's that. And then just a couple other quick heads up if you don't know it. Single-handed warfare. He's done a number of great video reviews and unboxings, and I always get a kick out of his reviews because he superimposes his face on various historical figures for the game intros, and pretty comprehensive yet enjoyable review of games that he'll do. Number of other people. We got Eddie Carlson on here, who's been running through old school tactical, and in fact, this dude's taking it upon himself to transform this game, which is yet to even be released, to Vassal. So for those of you that are curious, check him out and give him a thank you for his efforts, so we can all benefit from experiencing what the yet to be released old school tactical game will be like. Late Night Gamer, he's got some interesting stuff. Stuka Joe can't be beat. This guy is I don't know how you put it, probably the closest thing you could get right at this point anyway to somewhat of a cinematic presentation or movie when it comes to a war game. In fact, the intros to his videos are just that. Basically, it's like watching the introduction to a movie. Very clever, very innovative. Enjoy his stuff. Thank you, Stuka Joe, for your time. And then again, too many to mention here, but if you do a little digging, they're not hard to find. So to all you guys on YouTube, all your the time and effort that you take, it's greatly appreciated, and continue your efforts, please. So I think that's that with the idle banter and what's going on. It's currently raining right now. I think we're getting the after effects of the hurricane that I think was the biggest hurricane on record, and then quickly subsided, luckily, as it reached Mexico. So now we've got winds and rain and clouds and darkness. I feel like I'm living in Mordor, but that's fine. We need the rain here in New Orleans, and that might sound odd to say, but I gotta tell you, we haven't been getting much rain, and it's kind of weird. Not complaining because I like the sun, but it's kind of odd for New Orleans to not get much rain. So that's what we're getting, and I guess I bring that up because the rain coincides with what I'm going to get into next. A rainy night that preceded a historical day that lives in infamy and fame, and that be Waterloo. Anthony, here you go. Here's your episode. You requested it. As you know, as you've learned, I don't like to rush things. But here it is, and to be honest and fair, I had fully intended to do the Waterloo episode and would have done it regardless of Mr. Salveggio's behest. But his request is appreciated, and didn't want to let him go unrewarded. So here it is, the Waterloo episode. Now, I perhaps should throw in somewhat of a disclaimer so you guys know how I plan on approaching this subject, of which so much has been written about. Um, you've got movies, you've got documentaries, books left and right. Some of you probably know everything there is to know about it. Some of you, I'm sure, a little less. But I think all of you are probably aware of what Waterloo was, what it means. And even though those of you that I'm sure none are listening, but even for people that could give a crap about war or military history, even they seem to know something about Waterloo. And I was pleasantly surprised the other day as we're watching Jeopardy to hear my significant other answer the correct date regarding Waterloo. And I just looked at her, and she stated something to the effect that, "Oh, I know some stuff about history," and never thought she cared that much. To be honest with you, she probably came across a previous Jeopardy question and remembered it. They tend to repeat some. Nevertheless, it was cool that she knew the answer, and I was very proud because she knows how I feel about all things Napoleon. So we'll leave that at that. So this is the Waterloo episode, and for a long time, perhaps part of the reason I had yet to tackle it is because of the plethora of ways to tackle the subject. Again, you can only read so much, and you don't want to repeat the basics, which, again, most of you, I'm sure, already know. So how to present this in an enjoyable, informative format, well, I may have come up with a method, but that's up to you guys to decide. A book I've long been aware of, and again, some of you may or may not, called Blundering to Glory, Napoleon's Military Campaigns by a gentleman named Owen Connolly, has been around for some time, and I flipped through this thing, and he has a relatively short chapter on Waterloo, which is what I pulled the bulk of this show's information from. But his thesis remains a continual thread throughout the book, and he focuses on pretty much all of Napoleon's major conflicts throughout his career. And I'll get to the crux of that thesis more towards the end of this account. But that's what I pulled things from, and I added some of my own stuff in here. But information-wise, that's the avenue I chose to go down. Interestingly enough, he entitles this chapter "The Glorious Irrelevance." And rather than start way back and work our way up to Waterloo, we're just going to jump right in. And I may step back in time here and there just to give brief recounts that relate to the subject matter at hand. But we're just going to jump right in, and after this, we'll go over the top 10. I think we can pull 10 top 10 Waterloo games in wargaming, and see what you guys out there think about that. So, Waterloo saw the exit of Napoleon, no doubt, but it also saw the birth of Wellington's glory. This guy would go on to be hailed as probably one of the most famous commanders due to his defeat of Napoleon in Belgium. And oddly, this battle, outside of the obvious results, of course, wouldn't have made too much difference if Napoleon had won. And I guess here's where the author aptly entitles this chapter "The Glorious Irrelevance," because the inevitability of Napoleon's defeat would have been simply prolonged, and another Waterloo would eventually seal the deal. So let's assume for the moment that Napoleon won. What does that mean? Well, that's great for Napoleon, and it might create some optimism for his supporters and the men that believed in him. But honestly, ultimately, I think again it would have only prolonged the inevitable fall and decline of Napoleon and what he was attempting to do. If it hadn't happened at Waterloo, there would have been a quote unquote Waterloo at some point, and in my opinion, sooner than later. Surely it would have played out differently, not word for word or to the exact T, but you would have had another, again, quote unquote Waterloo at some point. And even if the Napoleon of 1815 could be transplanted with the Napoleon of 1796, it can be argued that these are two different men. The later Napoleon, um, perhaps not quite so confident as his younger self, having suffered, tasted defeat, perhaps not so quick to make decisions, maybe in his later days suffering from a bit of the old paralysis by analysis rather. But it would have made a little difference anyway. Again, his marshals were old and tired at this point, and most were either unwilling or unable to serve him. Grouchy, Napoleon's one new marshal, the author calls a walking mistake. Now that might seem a little harsh. Um, then again, it might seem apropos. Often blamed for Napoleon's defeat. Now I don't know that that's quite fair. Most of all, Napoleon was under great pressure to win a quick, decisive military victory, lest his political backers lose patience. Now, bear this in mind as I read this to you. Time is of the essence here, and for a couple of reasons. A, Napoleon doesn't have the luxury of dragging his feet and taking his sweet time to do what he wants. He needs a military victory, and he needs it fast. Again, these political supporters can only support him for so long, so he needs to act now. The Allies, on the other hand, I should back up. And then there's also the more pressing issue as we get into the Battle of Blucher, but we'll get to that shortly. The Allies, on the other hand, were under no pressure to do likewise. They didn't have time bearing down on them. I guess in a sense they did, but not in the same way, make or break way that Napoleon had time weighing on his shoulders. And more, they outnumbered Napoleon 2-1 at the start, 4-1 within weeks, and eventually would outnumber Napoleon 5 or even 6-1. And it's curious because you see figures such that Napoleon, it's shown that he outnumbers the Allies, but I don't know that that's correct. On the morning of the 17th, the day before the battle, at about 11 a.m., Napoleon orders Ney, one of his marshals, to attack Quatre Bras, while he marched from Ligny to take Wellington on his flank. But before he can march, the Allies they flee from Quatre Bras, which basically results in Napoleon and Ney joining up and giving pursuit. The French marched in mud, sometimes knee-deep as rain fell, all while Wellington's horse artillery bombarded them. And it took the French until midnight to cover 10 miles, ultimately ending up at Wellington's chosen battlefield, where British lines were for the most part already in position. Now, this is key as well. Wellington has the luxury of choosing where he wants to fight Napoleon. This will make a big difference as this account goes on. Wellington placed his army on a ridge, while Napoleon also placed his army on a ridge to the south. And Wellington intended to begin the battle defensively, and the terrain he chose corresponded to this. So this ridge that he's on is basically a huge forward slope, and facing the French was steeper than the reverse slope, which allowed troops to be put in defilade and be shielded from artillery. They could move in cover and conceal their position while doing so. So terrain, specifically this ridge, plays a huge part in the Battle of Waterloo. Not only does the rain and mud from the night before. The total Anglo-Dutch force at Waterloo was roughly 68,000 with 157 guns. Now it's important to note that the elan, or the spirit of the Allies, was extremely high, as among the troops were you've got Peninsular veterans, Scots regiments, Royal Guards, um, KGL. The British and the KGL actually were also great marksmen, whereas the French tended to indulge in area fire and just fire at one specific area rather than pick individual targets. So, as far as positions go, let's see, the Allied left was rather thin but consisted of quite reliable units. What is more, this is where Wellington expected Blucher to reinforce. So the Allied line had two advance posts. You've got the Chateau Hugomont on the right and La Haye Saint farmhouse on the left. And then Napoleon's army, you're looking at roughly 72,000 with 250 guns, with his left and right shored up by, again, mostly reliable troops. And one could say that at Waterloo, two defenders were squaring off. Strategically speaking, Napoleon would play the attacker, but tactically speaking, he would defend through offense by holding back a large reserve which would pounce on an enemy's mistake. And this was typical Napoleon tactic. Now, some can argue that this is no tactic at all, among them the author of this book. But nonetheless, it worked. And Napoleon had no reason to believe it wouldn't continue to work. Wellington would begin in typical fashion, typical Wellington style, as would Napoleon. But the difference is Napoleon would end up resorting to all-out frontal attacks. Now, this is only partially true because it isn't necessarily Napoleon that does this, and we'll get to that as well in a second. Napoleon had to win on the 18th, lest Blucher come to Wellington's aid. So you've got Napoleon, a time crunch. He needs a military victory. He needs it for propaganda purposes. He needs it to further solidify an appearance that what he's doing is right and perhaps even divinely inspired. And he has to accomplish this victory, this particular victory, before Wellington is reinforced by Blucher and his Prussian army. So before the engagement kicks off, Napoleon states to Soult, "Because he beat you in Spain, you think he is a great general. I tell you he is a bad general, and the English are bad troops. This is going to be a picnic." Now, whether Napoleon legitimately believes this or he's saying this to steal the nerves of Soult, it's hard to say. It's difficult to think that Napoleon would truly think of the British in this respect, but hey, I suppose anything's possible. On the 18th of June, the day dawns bright and clear. No more rain, no more clouds, but the ground is soaked, and as such, artillery and wheeled vehicles, which have to be dragged into position, are now being dragged through mud. And so it's 11 a.m. basically before the French are even in position. And eventually the French artillery sound. So you're looking at around 11:30, and Rie begins an assault on Hugomont. The walls of the chateau provided the Allies excellent cover, and about 1:30, the French did in fact break through. There's an account of this particular gate that is there, and the French are attempting to push through this gate, which is being held at one point completely by one heroic individual who's got his back against it, trying to hold the French at bay. The French break through, but it's short-lived, as Wellington is quick to send reinforcements, and the French are pushed back. The chateau would in fact continue to be fought over. This is despite the fact that Napoleon had ordered it bypassed, and probably for good reason. Also, at around 1:30, French artillery begins firing again. But once again, very little damage is done as Wellington's troops were, first of all, behind the crest from which exploding artillery shells can't reach them, but also the ground is so wet and muddy. As soon as these artillery shells land in the mud, they basically bury themselves in the ground, and when they explode, not much of anything happens. You also have to take into account that as these artillery are being fired, they're being pushed back. They have to be remaneuvered into position. Doing this in the mud has to be extremely tiring for the people repositioning these artillery pieces. So to think that a high rate of fire and accuracy is the rule of the day would be laughable. 2 p.m. D'Erlon Corps attacks right up the middle, and here you have Picton's vets picked off French from behind a hedge. And at this point, Uxbridge launches his cavalry into their flank, and they cut through the French and attacked the Great Battery. They're having great success with this cavalry charge, but they tend to go overboard, kind of outstretch, go further than they should. And the Scots Greys are flanked themselves by French Lancers, so I guess lesson learned there. All told, D'Erlon was pushed back. 4 p.m., D'Erlon attacked once again and again was pushed back. Now we're looking at just after 1 p.m., and Napoleon thinks he sees Grouchy approaching. Great news, right? Well, that would be, because the mass of troops that are with him could be greatly put to use, but as he's looking to the northeast, he soon learns it is in fact Blucher. And now consider earlier Napoleon had sent Grouchy an order to march on Wavre and drive out the Prussians, but amended the order after the Prussians began approaching to join with our right. He says, to reiterate, he sends an order out to Grouchy, basically telling him to drive out the Prussians, but then he adds kind of a PS, I guess you call it, and says, no, just join with our right. Well, it can be argued, and it has been, that that is a contradictory order, which I guess is true, but a savvy enough marshal or general would be able to use common sense and figure out what to do. Grouchy fails in this respect. He receives this order around 4 o'clock, and by now he was attacking the Prussian rear guard at Wavre. And although Grouchy could hear the cannon at Waterloo, he chooses not to, quote, march to the sound of the guns. Now, this is an old just rule of thumb. You march to the sound of the guns. 9 times out of 10, that is the action that needs to happen. If in doubt, he doesn't do that. And this can rightly so be argued that this will be costly. So that brings us to... Yeah, so he chooses to continue the attack on Wavre rather than come to Napoleon's aid. So though Napoleon's order, again, as I said, was contradictory, common sense would have dictated Grouchy come to Napoleon's aid instead. Napoleon is in fact deprived of a whole 1/3 of his army. So on the French right, Napoleon had to release his reserve to deal with Bulow's Prussians, and so now all he had left was his guard. Looking at 4 p.m., Ney, pesky Ney, becomes battlefield commander, and regarding this, it's unclear what happens for the next 2 hours. Napoleon heads back 2 miles away, basically to headquarters. To do what? I don't know. He had complained of stomach ailment. Some say, his age during this time was such that he easily yielded to inflictions upon his health, etc. tons of conjecture regarding just what went through Napoleon's head to make him decide to relinquish command to Ney. There's even been speculation that perhaps Napoleon knew that things were taking a turn for the worse and had planned cunningly to use Ney as a scapegoat if, in fact, things did turn south. Now, I'm not a subscriber to that theory. Too much at stake to just put Ney in command in the hopes that you could have a handy scapegoat. But it's a clever theory. So, nevertheless, Ney is put in charge while Napoleon, I don't know what he's doing, sitting on the pot or, again, plagued with indecision or who knows what. Honestly, he himself could be suffering from post-traumatic stress in some form, and that can have a cumulative effect. And perhaps he just needed to head back and collect his head. After suffering through things like 1812 in Russia and all the horrors that that entailed. Who knows what's going through Napoleon's head at this time? Again, he's a different man than he used to be. So, that in mind, Ney sees, and here's a key moment, ready? Ney sees Wellington Center, what he thinks is falling back, okay? He sees Wellington perhaps repositioning troops, maneuvering, switching things around as he's wont to do on the battlefield. Ney sees this and interprets it as, this is the moment. They're falling back. I need to act. The time is now. It takes this as a retreat, but in fact, again, there's simply it's thought that Wellington was just, in fact, attempting to have his troops duck beyond the crest, again, for better protection from firing French artillery. So Ney decides he's going to attack and beckons Milhaud to follow, and somehow or another, the Grand Cavalry also end up following. It's not certain whether Ney gave a specific direct order to the Guard Cavalry to follow, or if Milhaud did so, or if the miscommunication, the Guard Cavalry somehow received the impression that they were to follow and did so. So now you have 2,800 French cuirassiers, followed by 2,000 lancers and chasseurs, charging over the crest. And when I say crest, this is a long, very steep embankment. The ground is slowly drying at this point, I would think, but still muddy, still slow. I think in a game this would be accurately represented by a movement factor penalty. Something would have to be added on in order to move across this terrain. But once they get up the crest, what happens? They're met by direct fire from artillery at point blank range, and this entails canister, which is some nasty stuff. We're not talking about your typical cannonball flying through, knocking down rows of troops. This is tiny, a ton of tiny, almost shotgun blast tearing through the French ranks. And then once they make it through that, they only have the British infantry squares to welcome them, and of course that just wreaks havoc on the French. As brave as the French riders were, the horses were lesser so, and it was just a massacre. The French squadrons eventually withdrew, but Ney leads another attack. Keep track of this, ready? You got a little counter button thing that you can keep track of each attack Ney attempts. Attack number 2. Ney leads another attack, this time with about 8,000 horsemen, only to meet the same fate as the first attack. Okay, now you could say once, didn't work, try again, fair enough. But after that, rather than throw in the towel and reconsider something else, what does Ney do? You guessed it. He reorganizes, count it, third attack. until around 6 p.m. he lets the exhausted cavalry rest. 3 attacks. Eventually, Ney heads a fourth attack. Got it? Number 4. This time with a solid group of both infantry and cavalry. He was able to take the farmhouse, but that was really it. Nothing else paid off. So after Ney's 4 attacks, what is Napoleon left with? He's left with basically the guard infantry, which was his last whole untouched, unscathed unit. And Lebeau's corps was in trouble in Plancenoit. So by 5 p.m., had lost it completely to the Prussians. So Napoleon decides, I guess he's back on the scene at this point, probably much to his dismay, having learned of Ney's, 4 attacks. Napoleon unleashes some of his guard, who initially were thrown back, but eventually are able to retake Plancenoit. So now Napoleon, realizing he must break Wellington's center soon, personally leads 12 battalions of the Old Guard down their defensive slope in preparation for an all-out assault. What happens? Again, he hands over 11 of the battalions to Ney, and then goes off to check on Plancenoit. Does that sound... it's hard to place yourself in the man's shoes and to say, well, I would have done differently for this reason or that reason. But something doesn't sound right here. I understand Napoleon's concerned with something going on elsewhere. But again, I've already said paralysis by analysis. Not that he's necessarily paralyzed in what he wants to do. But it does seem like, and this has come up before, Napoleon almost seems reluctant to decide. I guess it can be argued that, well, he did decide because he decides to go to Plancenoit, but that almost seems like a decision that allows him to avoid a decision. Again, hands the reins to Ney and says, here you go. Ney, who's already had 4 horses shot out from under him, he's got a broken sword, literally, that he's waving around. His hat's been shot off his head. Red hair flowing through the air. It makes somewhat of a dashing figure, and it is his charisma and ability to lead men is in fact not argued. But there's something amiss with Ney at this point. There was something amiss with Ney, I would say, by the 3rd attack, which can be argued, but then you can't argue that there wasn't something wrong with Ney by the 4th attack. So here we're looking at a 5th attack. He's on his 5th horse. 7 p.m., just after 7, Ney leads 6 battalions forward, followed at interval by 5 more. And sandwiched between them is a ton of horse artillery until about 8 p.m. They finally reach the crest with drummers drumming. And somehow along the way, wouldn't you know, they had veered toward the left. Why? Well, you have to envision the battlefield to the best of your ability, and it's easy to do so and see things clearly in your head. But you have to remember, with cannons firing and rifle fire, all this stuff taking place, the smoke had to have been just impenetrable as far as being able to see anything. So to think that Ney veered slightly towards the left is not without reason. It's hard to keep track of what is going on. The concentration of troops is such, mixed with the invisibility provided by such thick smoke, it's easy to think one could go off track. He does so, not drastically, but he does do so. And what does this lead him? It leads him right into Wellington's freshest troops, who are basically obscured by tall grain. And at Wellington's behest, stand and fire. The first volley takes out about 400 French, and the attacking French briefly hesitate. then continue forward, only to be hit by another volley. And at this point, confusion basically tears through the ranks. The attacking French are thrown into retreat. Over 1,200 guards and 60 officers lay dead. Now, let me back up a second. There has to occur within the mind of the French soldier something of great significance when you see the guard do anything. That is to say, the old guard especially. Napoleon always kept the old guard in reserve. This was his creme de la creme, the best of the best. Uh, he was rarely used them because if he was to lose them, uh, he would quite literally lose the empire, not just in the minds of his soldiers and on paper, but quite literally, because this was the best of the best. He used them rarely, but when he did, it was to great effect. They had never lost. There's a game that I played, and I want to say it was Napoleon's Triumph. Fantastic game. Now, don't quote me on this, but there's a little rule in there that states, uh, and this isn't a Waterloo game, but it is indicative of what happens when Napoleon's old guard was released. So if you choose to release the guard, the French morale, goes down. Now that sounds backwards. Why would the morale of the French go down uh, upon seeing such a great, revered body of troops go forward? Well, if nothing else, perhaps the basic fundamental reason being uh, the French weren't dumb. You know, your average soldier was quick to learn and knew that it wasn't things. Let's put it this way: things must have been pretty bad for Napoleon to have to resort to releasing the guard. So certainly there had to have been a moment of doubt as to the direction the battle was going. And again, if the old guard moved forth and failed to achieve what needed to be achieved, it all was lost, because if they couldn't do it, no one can. You know, the old guard, he's our man. If he can't do it, no one can. Well, that was that was very true. And so again, I always thought it interesting that the designer of that game chose to add that if you choose to use the old guard, the morale of the French goes down by one. Very interesting, and I like it. But that's what happens, and so after the old guard approaches, having never lost, they are forced back, and over the battlefield is spread 1,200 of them. Something they're definitely not accustomed to seeing, if ever having had to see. So Ney, being the man that he is, and what kind of man is Ney? Well, at this point, it's argued that Ney, again, there's the theory of combat fatigue, or what we now call post-traumatic stress. Ney is a survivor of the whole 1812 debacle. And I tell you, not a lot of people did survive that, but those that did certainly, certainly would have, at the least, never a good night's sleep, nightmares, anxiety, um, fear. All of this adds up to wear on your nerves. And Ney is only human, and certainly this had somewhat of an effect on him over time. To say to what extent, again, is only to theorize. But Ney tries to rally his broken center, shouting, "Come see how a Marshal of France dies," end quote. Now, I suppose you could argue he meant this quite literally, and perhaps for whatever reason wanted to die. Now, I don't know that the man specifically wanted to die, but it sure seems like he wanted to rid himself of existence, of earthly existence. um, but he tries to rally the center. Come see how a Marshal of France dies. Well, it might be more appropriate to put it, come see how a combat fatigued a marshal who has been perhaps in, incorrectly left in command on part of Napoleon, poor decision. Come see how this marshal is failing, um, is now recklessly uh, using not only his own life but the lives of his men to attempt to achieve an objective that is perhaps better achieved another way or not achieved at all. Simply retreating to fight another day perhaps might have been um, a better option at this point. But that, again, that's can be argued because once Blucher arrives, it's pretty much all is lost. Bottom line is Ney's not right in the head, and again, to recklessly, repeatedly attack the same position again and again and again and again and again. There's something broken in a man's head that wants to do that. About 9 p.m., Wellington waves his hat, gallops forward, and motions his army into a general advance. And at about this time, Napoleon, atop his Arabian mare Marengo, rides off under protection of grenadier and heavy escort to his carriage, from which he is driven halfway to the French border. From there, he mounts a horse and rides to Paris. Now, to say that he turned tail and ran is never more accurate in this case. Napoleon got out of Dodge, to say the least. And he was defeated militarily. He knew it. It was evident. Um, and not only was he defeated militarily, but in 4 days, he would also be defeated politically. And of course, that would spell the end of any further attempts on Napoleon's part to create any more havoc or mayhem via battlefield. So that is pretty much how the story goes. When it comes to Waterloo, I obviously left a ton of stuff out. I failed to address particular fighting units on both the French and the Allies side, which also, it can be argued, perhaps had a say in the outcome of this battle. Um, I highly recommend you guys read about Scots Greys, KGL, number of troops. A lot of these allies, they were very well trained when it came to firing a rifle. Very good at doing so. There's a number of more peripheral factors, is what I'm getting at, that certainly need to be addressed, and due to time factors and such, I was unable to do so, but they certainly shouldn't be neglected, at least if you're taking a more comprehensive look at this. So, throughout his book, this guy, Owen Connolly, and I like the book. It's an okay book, and I like his take, his approach. It's an interesting one. I don't know that I necessarily agree with it, but it's interesting. And what is his take? His take is that Napoleon had no tactical doctrine. This is his thesis statement that he comes back to again and again throughout this book after describing events that take place before, during, and after battles. Napoleon has no tactical doctrine. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it could be argued, I suppose, that this is a good thing, because guess what? It worked for him. It worked for Napoleon for a long time. Probably would continue to work for Napoleon were it not for a couple of things. One being the coalitions. The Allies slowly learned and were more effective at joining forces to fight him rather than allowing Napoleon to fight them one at a time. A number of other things. But arguing that Napoleon has no tactical doctrine, I think, is also simultaneously a way of saying, nonetheless, it worked for him. That having no tactical doctrine was in itself a kind of doctrine. Um, Obviously, not a rigid doctrine, but therein lies the beauty of it. He always allowed himself wiggle room to adjust as things happen, and I've talked about this in the past as well in another podcast. Napoleon, the author states, was an improviser, and I think that might be perhaps one of his most accurate statements. And again, this is not necessarily a bad thing. Who profited from his enemy's mistakes. So be it. Good for him. It worked. It was effective. Is this to say that he was a terrible tactician? It depends on your perspective. He often violated his own maxims, contradicts himself in what he would espouse as military doctrine when it comes to attacking and defending. But this would make sense that he violate his own maxims, because if he didn't contradict himself, he would be thrown into a rigid, again, almost concrete form of action, which wouldn't allow for a bending. It would break when you would attempt to bend those maxims. Often, he often blundered, but always scrambled to victory. Perhaps his most honest declarations were, quote, "True wisdom for a general is in energetic determination." I don't know if I agree with that, end quote. And, quote, "Military genius is a gift of God, but the essential quality of a general-in-chief is strong character and the determination to win at all costs." Well, you could apply that to anybody, so I don't know why that's especially indicative of of Napoleon. That kind of sounds like a generic statement. There is a better quote, which I failed to locate, but it goes something like this, and Napoleon was aware of this fully as he said it. But he said that war is a series of accidents, and the best master of a war, or the best tactician, is he who is able to use luck to master those series of accidents. And I would agree with that 100%. Napoleon was probably the greatest commander of all time, says the author, but his genius lay in scrambling and not in carrying out a preconceived plan. Again, this is not a knock on Napoleon. This is an honest observation. Napoleon, to say he had no preconceived plan, I don't think it's an inaccurate statement, and there was a reason for that, because it worked. It allowed him, again, wiggle room to adjust accordingly throughout a battle's nature, which is typically unpredictable. How can you predict something when that which you're trying to predict is of an unpredictable nature? Does that make any sense what I'm trying to say? Okay, I'll stop. So, finally, I guess you could add regarding Napoleon, in a lot of respects, he was more of a reactor than a proactor. Not to say that he didn't act, that he was not the aggressor ever. Certainly he was. But he was always ever keenly aware of the enemy's actions, which would allow him to react. And it was in this reaction that his genius, his proclivity towards victory, proved most effective. Napoleon was a master of patience and waiting for the enemy to act, and almost inevitably at some point make a mistake from which he would capitalize upon. Why was that different at Waterloo? Because he didn't have the luxury of time to sit around and wait to see what Wellington would do. Blucher was on his way. He needed a victory. He needed it fast. He needed some political, pro-political propaganda. He needed things to happen quick. Also, to recap, the terrain definitely a decisive factor in Wellington's victory, as was um, the rain and the mud, which slowed things up at least through the morning. He couldn't even get his stuff set up until around 11 because of the mud. So the weather had a factor, a number of things. But to say that Wellington, and Wellington's a swell guy, I'm sure. I didn't know him personally, but to say that Wellington is this great genius commander, I suppose you could, but I don't know that I would be of the same opinion. Certainly, he was able to look almost with a surveyor's knack at the terrain and use it to to his advantage. Um, Certainly, he had a sense of timing, which is very important. But to say that it was solely Wellington's wit that won him that battle, you might be stretching his abilities. Nonetheless, that is Waterloo, and with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I encourage you to read more about it. To recap, the book is Blundering to Glory: Napoleon's Military Campaigns by Owen Connolly, and the bulk of the information that I combed for this was out of chapter called The Glorious Irrelevance. So let's take a quick break, come back and look at the top 10 Waterloo Napoleonic games and see what you guys think. I'll talk to you in a second. So the first game we'll look at is a game that has yet to be released, and you can ask, well, how can this be part of the top 10 if it hasn't been released? Well, because I have every confidence that when this thing is released, it should be included in the top 10. So we'll start with this and work our way up the list. And this is Napoleon's Last Gamble. And if you go to Operational Studies Group's site or Board Game Geek, you can learn about this. Kevin Zucker, perhaps the linchpin, the kingpin, the man, if you will, when it comes to all things Napoleonic. This guy, all of his designs are to be marveled at and looked at with awe and wonder, as well as played with much enjoyment. Napoleon's Last Gamble is going to have 5 battles from the Waterloo campaign, which Napoleon began by seizing the central position between the Prussian and British armies. So this is one of the games from OSG's Library of Napoleonic Battles series. So if you already know how to play that, all you will need to know is the specific rules for this particular game. You're going to have 2 maps, two 22 by 3 maps, one 17 by 22 inch map, about 560 counters, 100 playing cards, and that's standard with Mr. Zucker and his games. 2 rule books, 15 player aid cards. You hear that? 15 player aid cards? Covered in a box. Well, I would hope it's covered in a box. Battles simulated are Quatre Bras and Ney at the Crossroads on 16th of June, so one of the lead-up battles to the main one, Ligny. The Last Victory, 16th of June. Wavre, Grouchy's Blunder, 18th of June. Aptly named. Waterloo, A Near-Run Thing, 18th of June. And La Souffle, Rap's Last Stand, 28th of June. So keep an eye out on that. I'm not sure what the release date will be, but should be good stuff. That brings us to the battles of Waterloo. And let's see, this came out in 1994. This is number 9 on our list. This is by Richard Berg, and I have mixed feelings about Mr. Berg, both regarding his games and him as an individual. That's all I will say. But GMT Games, and you know, this won the Charles S. Roberts Award for Best Pre-World War II Board Game. Also won Charles S. Roberts Award for best wargaming graphics. Now, granted, this was in 1994, but that's always something to be considered. This covers 4 major battles during the Waterloo campaign: Mont Saint-Jean, Quatre Bras, Ligny, and Wavre, in one package, plus a campaign game. There are 3 maps included, but only the campaign game uses all 3. Scenarios require 1 to 2 maps. You've got 480 full-color 2-sided counters, 3 big full-color map sheets. Only comes with 1 10-sided die, 32-page rule book, including errata, 16-page scenario book, player aid cards, and all the stuff that goes along with that. But particular idiosyncrasies of this game are such. Listen, interactive turn sequence that integrates command, coordination, and control with play tension, the leader initiative marker system. Lower level command ability represented by cohesion and commitment. Combined arms approach to effective combat tactics. Multi-tiered movement capabilities. Grand battery, square, cavalry pursuit, Napoleon's health. Special chateau defense rules. Now, that is very cool regarding Napoleon's health. I don't know how many games incorporate that, but that piques my interest. That is number 9, which brings us to number 8 on our list. And this would be Waterloo 200. A game that I'm sure it's a current rank for this thing is 621 on the Wargame rank, and I already talked about how I feel about rankings on Board Game Geek, but I expect this game to rise like a phoenix through the ranks. I've heard great things about it. Seen many reviews regarding this game. I'm yet to play it, but I'm very, very curious. In fact, if I was to buy a Waterloo game tonight, I would buy this one. This is by designer Emanuele Sant'Andrea, and publisher is Vento Nuovo Games. Came out this year. And it's a new concept game, they say, covering the epic Waterloo battle with wooden blocks over a colorful 86 by 64 centimeter map board, over 200 wooden slash plastic components, and the rules are easy. They say 6 pages. So this is something that can be picked up and learned in a hurry. Players can start playing the game without too many rules to remember, and the game is 5 turn long. Not 5 turns long, 5 turn long. Then the 10 optional rules provide more specific and detailed rules for an enhanced realism, such as special cavalry abilities, including charge, scouting, impetus, artillery bombardment, retreat, combined attack, morale. Fog of War, the game must be played with the Fog of War on. That is referring to wooden blocks which are placed on the map. This is nothing new. But again, it sounds cool, looks cool, and you know, if you want to watch any videos on this, you have a number of choices. Everything from Marco Arnaudo to Kev Sharp at Big Board. I know he's a big fan of this game, unless I'm mistaken. So take a look, see what you think, and still got a few games to go, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you're itching to play a Waterloo game, not sure what to get, give this a shot. And you know what? After you play it, let me know what you think. We'll leave it at that. So then that's number 8, Waterloo 200. That brings us to number 7, and let's see how I'm not sure how I feel about this. This came out in 1995. Eagles, Waterloo. What we got here? Let me mark this, keep track where I'm at. This is by Tom Dalglish. And Columbia Games, came out in 95. So that should mean it is a block game, should it not? Let's find out. This recreates the climatic Waterloo campaign with Eagles Waterloo Edition. Fast-paced fun. Those are the taglines. Each Eagles Waterloo deck, okay, looks like it's a card game, 60 cards. The cards are selected from the 300 different cards that accurately portray every general, regiment, battery, and significant terrain present at the Waterloo campaign. How about that? Each Eagles card has been printed in 3 versions: gold, silver, and bronze. Gold cards are rare, silver cards are uncommon, and bronze cards are common. But each version of the card has the same game effect. So what this does, it allows gamers to obtain a complete set easily, while collectors can hunt for a silver or gold series. And it says full sets are also available. Um, This is the regimental uniforms and the portraits of the generals are historically accurate, providing the Napoleonic War buff with a detailed graphical order of battle for the Waterloo campaign. Card identities are printed in French, English, Dutch, or German, depending on the nationality of the regiment. And then they say special cards and rules recreate the flavor of the campaign and the period. And you got 4 battles that can be played. Sounds interesting. I'm looking at pictures here. I don't know if that's my thing. Then again, it might be. Couldn't tell you because I haven't played it. So that brings us to, that was number 7. That brings us to number 6 on our list, and that is a game I like to call Waterloo 20. Came out in 2008. Now this is not to be confused with Waterloo 200. This is Waterloo 20, designed by Joseph Miranda, published by Victory Point Games, and it's first in a series of games that they say features low unit density, that being 20 pieces or less per side, and a medium complexity. So, veteran designer Joseph Miranda has reduced the complexity and focused the scope of Napoleonic campaigns with this Napoleonic 20 game system. And this system provides for operational level maneuvers, but also has random event cards and night game turns to provide some of the friction of war that affected both sides greatly during the campaign. Morale plays an important role on both sides, as player can, in quotes, spend some to force march their pieces, help rally stragglers, or urge their troops on as they advance in battle. Consists of 9 pages of rules. Looks like 8 pages for standard rules. About 40 counters, 11 by 17 map, with 12 random event cards. So again, if you're looking for something with low rules overhead, quick, affordable, Waterloo 20. But again, I would grab Waterloo 200 before I grab that. Where does that leave us? That leaves us at number 5, Napoleon at Waterloo. I think these titles are running out of combinations. Napoleon at Waterloo came out in 1971. A moldy but goody Jim Dunnigan, the man himself. This was produced by SPI, then I guess Hobby Japan, as well as Decision Games went on to republish it. And you know, there's not much mentioned about it. I'm pretty sure you can find this print and play online for free. And in fact, I've done this. I don't know if you still can, but a few years back, I found the files. Not too hard to locate. If I knew the link off the top of my head, would gladly share it. But pre-print and play, and it's rudimentary to, because of its age, but you could do worse. And I enjoyed playing it. Elliot, if you, bless your heart, if you still listen to these shows, how you doing? I hope you had a good birthday. I made Elliot sit through this game. It wasn't his bag, I could tell. He was, in fact, the guy was so disinterested in playing this. He was in the other room. I forget doing what. But when it was his turn, I'd have to say, hey, come in here, it's your turn. And he would make some half-hearted moves and then leave the room again. So that should have been a telltale sign that the guy didn't want to play. But he was more my World War II Flames of War buddy. Anyway, I hope you're doing well, Elliot. But and I apologize for making you play Napoleon at Waterloo, but you know what? I enjoyed it. So that is Napoleon at Waterloo, a moldy but somewhat goody. I guess it's up to you. If you're curious, again, it's free to print and play. And that brings us to number 4, Wellington's victory. Battle of Waterloo, 1976. This puppy came out, designer Frank Davis. And you look at the artists, you start recognizing names over time. Redmond, Simonson, Joe Eust, Jeff Easley. Yeah, 1976. And believe it or not, this was Charles S. Roberts' Best Graphics and Physical Systems nominee. Didn't win, got beat out, but was nominated. And the 1976 Charles S. Roberts Best Tactical nominee. Now, the competition was probably less stiff back then than it is now, but that's still something to be considered. Wellington's victory. Let's see, another one of those games that there's little to nothing mentioned about it. You've got some after-action reports. I'm up here on the Geek, and stuff like that. I haven't played it, and it looks like you've got a SPI version, a TSR version that came out in '83, with a cover that looks anything but. If you glance at it, it looks more Dungeons and Dragons, but I guess they're at the gate there, trying to make their way through the walls of the fortress, and I don't know how I feel about that. But and then SPI re-released it in 2015. So there's another option. I haven't played it, but according to you guys out there, that is number 4 on our list of most liked Waterloo games, which brings us to number 3. Moving right along. Got a game simply called Waterloo, not in or at. It's just simply Waterloo. This came out in 2009. You guys like it? Again, I haven't played this either. But designer Martin Wallace, published by Tree Frog Games and War Frog Games from, I guess, the Frog family of games publishers. And what do we have here? This got the 2009 Golden Geek Best Two-Player Board Game nominee, as well as the 2009 Golden Geek Best War Game nominee, and then some other awards via JOTA. But two-player game, action system, they say, is a clever creation. So says they. You know the range of possible actions that you can take on a turn, but the opponent knows exactly how many actions you have. And that knowledge strips the certainty from your preparation. Well, you know, that rings of familiarity, aka Ostfront. Can you get your infantry back in a defensive position before the opponent thunders through with his cavalry? Not cavalry, cavalry. Sorry. If you don't think you can, you might develop timidly, which gives the opponent a better shot of taking valuable terrain. Damage in the game is represented by blue, red, or black cubes. I like it. And you can distribute the cubes throughout your lines during the game to represent the movement of troops back and forth from the front lines. Shifting all the damage to the back seems like a no-brainer, but if cavalry does break through your front line, your troops are toast. Morale is checked only in face-to-face combat, and it's handled by a die roll compared with the level of damage within an area. Control of areas like La Sainte is critical, just as Wellington tried to funnel French attacks through gaps and ridges in order to cut off their support. You can do the same, fighting for Highland to prevent being pinched. The French win if they take Mont Saint-Jean, the British if they take Rossens. If neither occurs before the end of 8, the last turn, then the British and the Allies have won. What do you guys know about that? I'm looking at pictures of this. That could be interesting. Now, why do I say that? Because the configuration of the pieces on the board is pretty intense, and you've got a fair amount of blocks. Oh Lord, do they really use that? Okay, here's a problem. I think they're using the meeple style blocks for the figures, and I loathe the little meeples silhouettes with like armless people. I don't need my blocks to vaguely resemble some sort of anthropomorphic figure. I don't require that. I have a very vivid imagination. Oh God. See, that really ruins it for me. Granted, those could be easily switched out. And I'll tell you what, another reason to grab up those Commands and Colors Napoleonics games, not only because it's a great game, but those blocks that are included can be transplanted into a number of other games, which I've done to great effect, and would immediately feel compelled to do so with this because, yeah, those Meeples things make me want to scream. I can't take it. All right, I gotta look away. That brings us to that was Waterloo number two, or number three rather. That brings us to number two, Napoleon, the Waterloo, the Waterloo campaign, not to be confused with other Waterloo campaigns. This is Napoleon, the Waterloo campaign, 1815. Came out in 74. Really? Is this the one that is? You know what? I somewhat agree with this because I've played the crap out of this. Designed again by Tom Dalglish, which we've already seen, as well as Ron Gibson and Lance Gutteridge. Um, Came out through Avalon Hill, then Columbia Games. Gamma 2 Games had a release as well. Yeah, this is the one. um, Nothing listed by way of description, but I can tell you firsthand because, again, I've played it a lot and enjoyed it. Again, this is another game that I was able to print and play. I don't know how I was able to do that. I don't have the links. No idea where I found them. But there's a map that I printed out. Got a hold of a PDF of the rule book. And I thought, I'm not even sure what... I think the combat system is what drew me in. Because it's kind of a... you maneuver your troops on map. And then when it comes to combat, you take the particular blocks, it's a block game, involved, and place them on a battle board. And Columbia Games just ran with this method. But fight it out on this battle board, and you can flank and all this stuff. And I played that thing, and I played that thing, and I could not. I came so close every time, which is probably why I wanted to continue to play it, because I just knew the next time I played, I'd get it. But I came so close as the French playing the solitaire. How do you do that with a fog of war block system? Very carefully, but it can be done. Um, every time I came so close. But time, again, is a factor, and if you don't start winning early on, the attrition thing, and it just, you might as well just give up. But it is a hell of a fun game. And I still have all those pieces I made, and that's cool. You know what? I'm tempted to drag this thing out again, or just buy an official bona fide copy. I think the copy, if I was to buy this, I would get or recommend the 1993, no, 2009 Columbia Games version, or the 93 version. The cover of the 93 version, and this sounds superficial, but hey, that's how I roll a little bit. The cover of this 93 version by Columbia Games is the same as Avalon Hill. The difference, and I'm not going to take the time to do this right now, but there is a difference in editions because one of the later editions offers more blocks, more actual pieces that you use in play than the previous edition. So that's the one you want. But I'll tell you what, there's another recommendation. In fact, anybody, and it's not specifically the Waterloo battle. It entails the preliminary stuff, the surrounding geographical areas, but the mechanics of the way you maneuver troops on map, the map is cool. The way you fight, Again, gathering those that are involved in combat, placing them on a battle board. You have a left flank, a center, and a right flank. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. It works. It's somewhat believable as far as getting a feel for that particular period and style of fighting. I highly recommend this. That is Napoleon, the Waterloo Campaign, 1815, as well as Waterloo 200, a game I haven't played that I recommend. Does that make sense? Sure it does. That brings us to number one, and you might be angry with me, but there is no number one. Why? Here's your homework. I want you guys to post below this video, or somewhere that I will see, what you think is the number one Waterloo game. It could be a game I listed. It could be a game I failed to list. You know what? It could be a miniatures rules set, which I'm a big fan of. And at some point, someday, that Napoleonics miniatures rules system that I am sitting on will hit the front burner, see the light of day, as it were. I'm going to knock the dust off of that thing and get it out to you guys. But that is a long, long way away. Probably sometime next year or even 2017. But have it on the to-do list. So there you are. Waterloo episode with some Waterloo games. To recap, you want to get Napoleon, the Waterloo Campaign, 1815. I recommend that over all of them. And then Waterloo 200. What's the number one game? That's for you to decide. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I value your opinion, and so feel free to do so. And that effectively concludes episode number 42. It ran way over. Certainly that is okay with you guys. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys are well. Until the next time I talk to you, again, just can't say enough about the majority of you out there that are just so wonderful to know. It's so reassuring to know that you guys are out there representing the hobby and pulling new people in and helping people that have been in, giving them advice, direction. It's all greatly appreciated, and it makes this hobby a great hobby. It really does. Osfront coming along nicely, and I'll continually post video developments as they arrive. I think the next one due is a components video. We're going to break this thing down into a series of videos rather than one huge blowout thing. It's just too much to handle. So that's that. As far as the next cast, don't know when, don't know where, don't know what. Always open to suggestions. There's some areas that I've neglected that need to be addressed. So we'll see how it goes. Thanks, guys, for listening. It means a lot. And talk to you next time. Keep gaming.